Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to the 11th day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy. Today I'm going to be talking about Desperate Remedies. Chapter 1. The Events of 30 Years. December and January 1835 to 36. In the long and intricately inwrought chain of circumstance which renders worthy of records and experiences of Cytherea Grey, Edward Springrove and others, the first event in directly influencing the issue was A Christmas Visit. So, Desperate Remedies was Thomas Hardy's very first published novel, and it was published in 1871. And it is my fourth favourite Thomas Hardy novel. Desperate Remedies is absolutely brilliant. We're now into my top 4 favourite Hardy novels, and I have so many glorious things to say about these 4 brilliant, brilliant books. Desperate Remedies is so underrated. It was Thomas Hardy's first novel, so when I first read it about this time last year, I didn't have very high expectations, but actually, it is a brilliant, brilliant, dramatic, exciting, pacey, wonderful novel with brilliant characters, brilliant themes, and a wonderful, incredible mystery. Desperate Remedies is, like The Hand of Ethelberta and Lysodian, considered one of Thomas Hardy's novels of ingenuity. In other words, it is a very plot-driven novel. There is a lot of plot and drama and mystery in here. The book follows a character called Cytherea Grey, and at the beginning of the book, her and her brother Owen are left as orphans after the death of their father. Their father has left them with very, very little money, so Owen and Cytherea decide that they need to find a way to support themselves. Owen is training as an architect, and Cytherea decides to go off and become a lady's maid. She has had a fairly upper middle class upbringing and has been fairly respectable, but after the death of her father they have so little money and she can't find a position as a governess, so she decides that what she's going to do instead is become a lady's maid. But before she goes off to become a lady's maid, she meets and falls in love with one of her brother's friends, Edward Springrove, who is another architect. But then she goes off to become a lady's maid in this grand house owned by someone called Miss Aycliffe, whose first name is also, by coincidence, Cytherea. And while Cytherea is there, she meets another man called Mr. Manston, and everything kind of goes on from there. It sounds, from my description, like a love story, and although there is a love triangle in there, for the most part this is a mystery novel. There are so many dramatic, mysterious things going on here, and so much drama. It is a brilliantly plot-driven, wonderful, wonderful book. So to talk about things that I like about this, one is obviously just the plot and how dramatic and page-turner it is. I would really recommend it as a place to start with Hardy, because I think it has his wonderful, fascinating characterization and his interesting human relationships, along with a very, very dramatic plot. Like, I read this so quickly when I read it, I flew through it. It's so dramatic and pacey and so mysterious and wonderful. Like, the plot of it is so brilliant. And despite the fact that when I read this originally, I was reading it from a very old 1970s edition, which spoiled the entire plot on the blurb, like the entire plot. It spoiled something that you don't find out until the last 5 pages, and I was spoiled for it just by reading the blurb of the book. But despite the fact that I was spoiled for all the plot, I still found it incredibly dramatic. Like, that's how good the mystery is, that even when I knew what the mystery was, I still wanted to go on and read it because it was so fascinating and such a wonderful, wonderful book. I love the mystery elements of it. I love how plot-driven and dramatic it is. It's such a fun, wonderful, wonderful book, and so thoroughly exciting. It feels at times more like a Wilkie Collins novel than a Hardy novel, and yet it still has Hardy's beautiful writing, Hardy's wonderful landscapes, Hardy's interesting themes and characters. I also love Cytherea as a character. I think she's a great, really interesting person. She has a lot of strength in that she decides to go off and be a lady's maid after her father's death in order to earn some money. She wants to have that independence, but at the same time she has a lot of difficulty because that is not the social position she's been brought up to have, and she finds it degrading in many ways. I think she's a very, very interesting character, and the way the book looks at her relationships with Edward Springrove and with Mr. Manston, and the way it explores sexuality through that, is very, very good. I also love her relationship with her brother, because I feel like it's not very often in books that you get a really nice sibling relationship, especially between a brother and a sister, and the way they support each other and care for each other, and the way that Owen's life and work and his illness at various times in the book kind of influences Cytherea's actions, I think is really, really interesting, and the love she feels for her brother is really powerful and really important. Edward Springrove and Mr. Manston are both very interesting characters. Mr. Manston is fascinatingly and wonderfully done. He's one of those clever, complicated, Hardy characters that you really never know quite what to make of. I also think Miss Aycliffe, the older Cytherea, is really, really interesting, and she is at times a harsh woman. She can be really, really cruel and at times nasty, and at times does things that you really don't understand and is really quite mad, but at the same time she's also very, very interesting. She loves very deeply, and you can kind of see in her life what makes her as she is, and you can understand her motivation even if you don't agree with the things she does. There are so many important and interesting themes in this book. The theme of class and social position is very, very important and very interesting. Also the theme of sexuality and so on is fascinating as well. There's a really interesting bit which for some reason really sticks in my head, where Manston and Cytherea are standing really close together, and they're standing so close that he is physically touching her clothes, and there's this fascinating bit where Hardy kind of writes about how like central that is for Cytherea. I know that sounds really weird, but it's actually like a really interesting passage, and I think he explores sort of Cytherea's sexuality as well as her personality in a really interesting way, in a way that Hardy often does with characters, which is something I really enjoy about Hardy, because obviously it's not something at the forefront of all Victorian literature, but it's something Hardy does definitely explore, even if sometimes in a roundabout way. I also love the way he explores kind of influence, and the influence Miss Aycliffe has over Cytherea. Like, their relationship is really, really interesting, and the power balance between them is fascinating. And then the ending of this book is perfection. I think Desperate Remedies has my favourite ending of any Thomas Hardy novel, because while I love Thomas Hardy very dearly, very, very, very regularly in his books, it is the ending that let it down slightly for me. But Desperate Remedies, I adore the ending. I think it's brilliant. I think it's fantastic. I think it's so clever. Everything in the whole book is wonderful, but the last quarter is just incredible. It's so dramatic, so powerful, so thoroughly exciting. Like, that's one of the things I really love about Desperate Remedies. It is such an exciting book. It's wonderful to have everything that I usually love about Hardy, his rich descriptions, his fascinating characters, the human relationships that are so well crafted, the well-observed people and situations, the well-observed themes, the fascination with class and with the countryside, with rural areas, with social positions, with gender, with power, but also to have this incredibly dramatic, exciting mystery. It's just wonderful. It's great. It's so great. I cannot recommend Desperate Remedies enough. It is very, very underrated, and it is a wonderful, wonderful Hardy book. So I have nothing bad to say about Desperate Remedies, because it is an incredible, incredible book. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below if you've read Desperate Remedies and what you thought of it, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about my third favourite Hardy book.